Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife and sharing some fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. On today's podcast, I'm talking to the wonderful Jody Day, the founder of Gateway Women, the global friendship and support network for childless women not by choice. She's passionate about helping women without children rediscover their dreams and get their groove back. Thank you so much, Jody, for joining us today. You've dedicated yourself to supporting and empowering women who are childless. How did you come to be doing that?
Well, it's interesting, thank you for asking that question, and thank you for inviting me onto this interview. It's really nice to meet you too. We can have a little fangirl moment. So I suppose as many kind of sort of women and people who sort of find themselves in cause-led professions, it came from my personal experience. So it came from my experience of becoming a childless woman and, not by choice, looking for support and finding absolutely nothing. I mean, this was coming up for 8 years ago now. And although there were sites out there, really break the internet amount of number of sites of kind of TTC, as it's called, trying to conceive. And then there are a few which were for women who were child-free, which is being childless by choice. There was nothing out there that spoke to me. There was nothing about, okay, I didn't want to be childless and I am. How do I make sense of my life and how do I move forward for that? And there was nothing. So I started a blog called Gateway Women. And I thought, well, if one woman reads this blog and understands what I'm going through and it helps her, that would be brilliant. Because I hadn't been able to find anyone to talk to about it that would actually listen. What would happen is I'd start talking to someone, even a close friend or a professional, and they would come back with what we call bingos, which is either, oh, you've still got loads of time, or, oh, children are more trouble than they're worth, have one of mine, or, oh, it's so great being childless, what's your problem? Or, oh, you can have one on your own, or you can just adopt, or a variety of things. And these kind of closed down the conversation. And nobody would let me talk about my pain. And so my love of writing, goes right back to, when I was very little. And so I sort of started writing about it. I didn't realize I was breaking a huge social taboo by being open about my childlessness. And 8 years ago, I was one of the very, very few people who was writing about it under her own name, with my photograph on my website and talking about my story. I really kind of broke through a big social taboo by doing that, which even now people might start to think, really? It was a big deal.
But I think it's that breaking of taboos, isn't it? And that whole being vulnerable oneself and taking one's story. It's so powerful for other women, isn't it? That's what I just fantastic.
I mean, vulnerability is like a big buzzword now.
Yeah.
Thanks to Saint Brene.
Yes, Saint Brene. Love a bit of Saint Brene.
But I would say that I wasn't vulnerable because I thought, yes, I need to be vulnerable or anything like that. I was just so desperate to talk about it. Do you know what I mean? I got to that point where I didn't really care what people thought. It was that story was eating me alive.
But I think what you've created out of it is just incredible.
So, I know, I really didn't expect or plan this.
I know, but that's how life goes, isn't it? Sometimes, it's just the way it takes us, isn't it? So what is your mission?
Well, my mission is to help as many childless women as possible, and increasingly thinking about the next generation. I look at the millennials, the poor, much maligned millennials, the snowflakes. That generation, yeah, unique and fragile. Each of them unique and each of them fragile, which is actually a horrible but also complimentary thing to say as well. And my nephews and nieces and the elder ones of my godchildren and the children of my friends are of that generation. and my children would have been of that generation. So one of the things I'm also thinking about is, the daughters coming up who are going to be childless, not by choice, when they find that out, I don't want them to be nothing for them. So I'm also thinking about creating a sustainability plan for Gateway Women. So I'm now training other women to lead my workshops, and I'm also on the lookout for sort of younger women in their sort of early 30s and things like that, who are starting to come to terms with their childlessness and thinking about them. So yeah, my mission is to help as many childless women as possible, and to continue to help them, after I'm pushing up the bluebells.
And when you started off on this path, did you have to change anything in yourself to be able to do what you're doing? Because obviously you're putting yourself out there, you're being public. Did you have to change who you were or anything about yourself to do that?
I was probably when I started doing this, I was at the lowest point of confidence I'd ever been in my entire life. I was grieving, although I didn't know it was grief. I was going through the perimenopause, although I didn't know it was the perimenopause, and neither did my doctor. I was living on my own, by myself, working for myself on my own in a flat that didn't allow pets, with my romantic and friendship life and financial life all in complete disarray. Coming out of an abusive relationship with a partner, not my ex-husband, but a partner afterwards, who I later realized was a narcissist. So I've been experiencing a lot of emotional abuse. So my confidence and self-esteem were just absolutely on the floor. Now, to go from that to sort of starting the blog was okay. Writing is in my comfort zone. But within a month, I was giving my first public talk. And so for me, I think I did have to make a huge change, which was, I didn't have to change something about myself, but I had to change how I was at that time, which is that I had to start faking that I had confidence again. And that was, and that was really hard. And also just having belief in myself as an entrepreneur, as someone who could kind of carry through on things. I was in as many of the women who come to Gateway Women who are in that transition from, of coming to terms with childlessness. I was in such a turmoil, so much unhappiness, so much confusion, so little confidence.
And how did your family and your friends react to you being so public, for you, to you actually making this your life's work?
Well, it's very interesting, and it is one of the things I do, sort of, the women who do like my mentorship program and things like that, which is that actually no one believes a prophet in their own land. So when women are kind of, creating a big change in their life, I often say to them, don't tell anyone about it. Really, really don't take the risk of, those people who are closest to you are sort of necessarily sharing it with them, because they may not see your vision. And also, although people think change is a great idea, they love it until it actually impacts them. So when we start to change and grow, that impacts all of our relationships around us. And although people don't realize it unconsciously, the people around us who overtly might wish to support us actually may find themselves undermining us, because us changing actually impacts their relationship with us. So it doesn't always go down well. I did lose some friends. The first big article that was published with me in The Guardian in 2012, I talked about being at a party with a group of friends, and what it was like, and because everyone else was a mother except me. I didn't use any names. I certainly wasn't rude about anyone, but I was basically sort of struck off the social list for speaking about it, even though really I was speaking about my experience of how hard it had been for me to be an outsider in amongst my own group of friends. So one would have hoped for empathy at that point, but I actually received the opposite.
That's really shocking. Yeah.
And it's, childlessness, really one of the unintended consequences, of childlessness is often that our peer group and our family relationships are really, really affected.
Yes, I can imagine it's very difficult all round, but it's breaking those taboos, isn't it? It's actually getting it out there and talking about these things and talking about. But it's interesting that even when you were talking about your experience,
it still became about them, didn't it? Sort of like, oh, what do you think you're doing? Goodness me. Yeah.
But I mean, that's, you know, I thought it was just me, and I thought it was just my friends. And one of the things about, you know, creating Gateway Women and bringing so many childless women from, you know, different cultures and backgrounds and countries together is that so much of our experiences are kind of, you know, universal. And so that's been a huge help. It's like, okay, this is childlessness. This is how it impacts friendship and family groups. This is not me being a rubbish friend. This is not my friends being rubbish friends. This is what it does. And also it can heal over time.
But I think that dynamic of change as well is it crosses over, because there is concern about, you know, if you change, if you try and change, you make big changes, especially when there is an established status quo. Nobody wants you to rock the boat. And it's a bit like that image I always think, the bucket of crabs, and one crab is trying to get out and the other crabs are trying to pull them back down again. It's really difficult.
And it is fairly unconscious, because as I said, you know, those people might actually want to support us in the changes that we're suggesting, and may even have been telling us for ages that we needed to do that thing, whatever that thing is. But once we start to do it, it's interesting what happens to the group dynamic.
Very difficult. So if you had one piece of advice to a woman in midlife who is coming to terms with infertility, what would that be?
Find your sisters. You know, it's a very lonely and isolating experience, and it's very hard to see a reflection in society of our experience that is positive, but also supports the sadness. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's either, oh, this woman who couldn't have children and she never got over it and she's a disaster, or there's, look at me, I don't have children and I'm so happy, you know? And it's actually, but you really need a group of women around you who get what it's like making that transition, because it's a huge identity shift to actually, you know, because so much of our gendered identity as women is tied up with the idea of motherhood, that to actually kind of forge an identity that doesn't include motherhood, particularly as you get to midlife, is very challenging. Because at midlife, it's like, well, you know, either you're a mum, either you're a potential mummy, or you're a yummy mummy, or you're going to be a yummy granny, or something like that. or, you know, but if you're none of those things and you're aging, there can be this sense of like, well, where do I fit in? Where are my role models? It can't just be Oprah.
That's one of the reasons, I mean, just going off a bit of a tangent, why I started the Mutton Club, because I looked out there and I saw, you know, Mum's Net and Grand's Net, and I thought, well, hang on a minute, where's the space in the middle just for women as women?
Yes.
Not that they're mothers or grandmothers or anything at all, but just a woman as a woman. And that's part of what was, you know, driving me setting up the Mutton Club, because I wanted it, and also a place where we can share what we have in common while acknowledging, you know, that we all have a different experience of life. But ultimately, you know, menopause, midlife, that transition is something we all go through, whether or not we have children.
Yeah, and aging in our society as a woman is extremely problematic. I mean, put ageism and sexism together, and then you add pronatalism, which is the conditioning that says that the only way to be a fully adult member of society is to be a parent. You add that one into the mix, you know, and it's like, wow, you know, there are so many ways I can get this wrong.
And a bit of misogyny at the same time.
Oh yeah, like, sexism, pronatalism, ageism. Yeah, yeah.
Goodness. Yeah. No, it's hard. It is very hard. So, okay, changing it slightly. What do you like about midlife now? That, you know, I think you're in a better place now than you have been. But, you know, what do you actually like about midlife?
Well, interesting, kind of very different from what I said before about, you know, what I had to change about myself, which is that I would say that, you know, I'm through the menopause and out the other side. So I'm 53. It happened sort of relatively early for me. And I think I feel the most kind of level in terms of my mood that I've ever felt in my life, you know, since, you know, I feel more like I did before puberty, which is I'm kind of courageous, ambitious, sort of self-confident, and a kind of, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I'll have a go at that.
Exactly.
And it's lovely to have that back. And I do feel that I went on a sort of, 35-year reproductive detour. Thank you, thank you, East. And I didn't even end up with a baby. And it felt like, and it was extraordinary to come out the other end of that. And for my focus, I do have a lovely partner now, but I was single for quite a long time during that period. And, and I sort of, men were no longer, and all partnership was no longer the focus of my life anymore. I found myself I thought, okay, well, I've given 35 years to mankind. I'm now going to give the rest of my life to womankind. But it's just a kind of a focus, a drive. It's like, I have a lot less energy, but I'm a lot more focused.
Yeah. It's really interesting you should say that, because I feel the same. This different hormonal profile, I love it, actually. I really, really love it. And I would never be doing what I'm doing now before menopause. It just wouldn't have occurred to me.
I wouldn't have had the nerve.
No, I don't think I wouldn't have. No.
But now I really don't care very much about what people think.
It's like, take me or leave me. Like,
well, I suppose I care what they think, but I don't necessarily sort of do anything about it.
Well, is it that you care because you want to change the world rather than that you care whether or not they approve or like you?
Mm.
Is that more, perhaps?
I approve and like myself.
That's all that matters, isn't it?
Yeah, and if someone's got a criticism of me, I'm interested to know what it is. So, in case there's something I can learn from that. But and in case that helps me do a better job, and serve more women and grow as a person. And if it doesn't, go on.
Now, you just said that you had less energy. Is there anything else apart from what we've talked about that you dislike about midlife? Is there anything that you find particularly difficult?
I don't know. I suppose, the aging process is the kind of the weird aches and pains. I don't really like very much, but there's very little I dislike about it. I mean, it would be lovely to have, the energy and body that I had at 20, but I wouldn't go back there for all the tea in China.
But you know what? Your body works now. It gets you up and down hills. It gets you wherever you want to go.
I feel very grateful for that.
Yeah.
A lot of, at this time of life, a lot of people I know are starting to deal with really difficult chronic health conditions, and I feel very blessed. I feel very blessed that I'm not.
Yeah, me too.
Mm.
So what brings you joy?
What brings me joy? Fresh air, blue skies, sailing, taking the dog for a walk, perfect cappuccino, having time to write. And my partner. Yeah, I have a wonderful partner called Olaf that I've been with for 18 months. And he's a joy. He's an absolute joy.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And what makes you angry?
Oh, goodness. How long have we got? That's something new as well. That's something new kind of post-menopause, is that I get not angry at people and things, but do you know what I mean? Injustice really, really annoys me. Whether it be around race or sexuality or gender, all kinds of prejudices, that really makes me angry. Unfairness and injustice. And I tend to sort of stay away from actually watching the political news. And probably my number one thing is I don't listen to the Today programme anymore because John Humphreys makes me really angry.
That's funny, because I used to be an avid Radio 4 Today programme listener. And I can't take it anymore either, because I don't know whether it's also the current climate that I just can't quite deal with. But I want a positive start to the day. I don't want my mood to be depressed by the Today programme.
Yeah, I listened to it. I listened to it all my life from sort of the age of sort of 14 onwards, and just a few years ago, as I was going, I just have to turn it off if John Humphreys is on, and then that sort of broke the habit of listening to it every morning. And then I would turn it on, and as you say, I would just be infuriated and depressed, and I just thought, I don't need this.
Yeah, But it's good, isn't it, if we can recognise that we just don't need it, so we just turn it off.
I'm no longer living in London. I mean, I'm now living in the country. And it used to be that when I lived in London, I discovered that actually, even if I didn't listen to the radio, because I haven't watched TV news for decades, because to me, it's actually trauma porn. I find it, those images of other people's distress, and then I can't actually do anything about it, have such a big impact on me, on our central nervous system. I think it's an extraordinary thing to watch that and not get. So I don't watch TV news, and then I stopped listening to the radio. I'd already stopped reading newspapers, because one of the ways I dealt with, being so different as a childless woman was to actually withdraw my attention from most mainstream media, because it did not represent me. And when it did represent me, it was so negative. I just thought, well, I don't need that. As there's a great expression, I think, in the recovery, sort of in 12-step movements, which is like, don't give away rent space in your head rent-free. And I just thought, no, not going there. But I still used to be able to know what was going on in the news. But I realise now I live in the country, because you're bombarded from so many different sources when you live in a city. But I am starting to get a bit out of touch now, which is, it's a weird feeling when you're used to sort of knowing what's going on.
Yeah. I lived abroad. I lived in China years and years ago when I was very young. And my mum used to send me, I don't know if it even exists, the Guardian Weekly. So I'd be able to catch up once a week on what was going on. But by the time it got to me, it was already 2 weeks late anyway. So it didn't make much difference, really. But it's amazing what you can manage without, isn't it, really, when you...
the sheer volume of information coming at it. I'm at a screen pretty much all the time. So there's, I on Twitter and Facebook, I usually know roughly what's going on.
Yeah. So, is there anything that people consistently misunderstand about you?
Consistently misunderstand about me? Well, that's a really interesting question. I do wonder. One aspect of my work that's quite interesting is that I as a leader and as being seen as someone quite inspiring for those women looking for a role model, I get that kind of I get that sort of guru thing projected onto me, and then people meet me and they find that I'm actually very down to earth and very sort of and quite funny.
That's the best gurus are, surely.
And I'm absolutely not having any of that stuff. I remember I was teaching a retreat in America a couple of years ago, and I did this amazing retreat with this woman called Christine Erickson, who works with horses, and she's also childless. And we brought our work together, and we did this amazing healing retreat for childless women, involving working empathically with horses and my work. Yeah. And in California. And there was this woman there from New York, and we were walking between barns or something like that. And one of the assistants for the retreat came up and asked me something about logistics to do with the workshop. And, are we going to have lunch in this barn or that barn, or boss? And I said to this woman, I said, Dad, I just need to let you know, I really don't respond well to deference. Like this. I
have a dream of being able to say that
and this American New York kind of high-powered businesswoman who was sort of walking alongside me in this retreat, she said, "But you're a freaking guru."
No, I'm going to put that on my dream board. I don't have a dream board, but I'm going to put it on my dream board that one day I will be able to say what you just said.
Yeah, and so I guess perhaps what people expect and what they meet is different, and probably people who don't know me at all, and I guess probably imagine I'm going to be really sad, because I'm childless, and I was really sad once, but I'm not anymore.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. This was an extract from a longer video interview available in our members club. That's where you'll find the strategies, support and connection you need to live the very best next phase of life. You can find out more about the members club and get the show notes for this episode at magnificentmidlife.com. It would really help me get the message out and inspire more women to feel empowered in midlife and beyond if you left me a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you may be listening to this, and share this podcast with your friends too. Help me change the world, one midlife woman at a time.